the workshop. Over to you, sir, now.
Okay, thanks, Rachita. And
Thank you.
I would like to express my pleasure in giving this talk. So I'm going to the topic on which I'm going to discuss is deep
Uh,
learning.
yes, sir.
My screen is visible,
Yes, sir, it's
right?
visible,
Okay,
and you can just make it on a full screen so that
okay,
it will be clear for
okay.
everybody.
So
Yeah.
uh, I'm dividing this talk into four parts, where I will first discuss few deep learning basics, and then I will talk about image classification, and then workings and semantic segmentation. I will try to keep this as introductory as possible so that it covers the wide audience. Uh, so let's get started. Uh, okay. First, we need to understand why we need it, why we need this deep learning at all. Traditional machine learning approaches can be divided into two sets of algorithms. Number one, we need to extract features, and set two is the classifier algorithms through which the machine is able to take the features and assign some predefined labels in a supervised learning setup. Now, what does this deep learning helps us? It helps us combining both these sets of algorithms into one network, which is a neural network. And neural network existed before also, but only in last few years, around 8 years, 6 or 7 years, deep learning has picked up so much. And the reason being, we will discuss shortly. Although when neural networks were there, what was the cost? Although it had a potential to solve very complicated problems, then at what cost it could uh, help us? The cost is that we need huge data labeling, and then we need huge computational requirements and difficulty in explaining the decisions made. So previously, these technologies or these things were not there, and as a result, deep learning was not picking up so much. But uh, soon, in 2012 or so, uh, in a ImageNet challenge, a using deep learning approach, a problem was solved. Image classification problem was solved, and as a result, uh, from then on, computer vision has gradually become almost deep learning, only seeing the kind of accuracies which we can get. So the silver lining here is that we get excellent accuracies, and we can do transfer learning. What is this transfer learning? Transfer learning is very interesting topic that has come up from the deep learning primarily. The idea is that if we have certain pre-trained networks, they can be used for solving other complicated problems. So uh, if we look at the plot between performance and the amount of data required for traditional algorithms to work and deep learning algorithms to work, it looks something like this, where uh, you see that performance, we may not get much performance using the older learning algorithms, but they do better when there is less data, even more than deep learning. But as there is more data coming up for the network to uh, benefit from, the deep learning algorithms become more and more accurate. So to understand what what this deep learning is all about, we need to understand two basic concepts, uh, which are convolution and neural networks. So convolution is nothing but we have a grid of numbers, And we have another grid of numbers, which is one can be called, like if we take example of computer vision, which is done on images. If we take a image and we have a filter mask, then that filter, when placed on the image and then corresponding pixels underneath are multiplied with this and then added up, then we get some number, and that number can be uh, placed wherever the center value of the filter mask is present. And as you can see, so it keeps on, first this is used and then this gets updated, then and so on. So all the pixels get updated by, which is a sum of multiplications of the corresponding underneath values with the filters. So this is not something very new. Before also there are when image processing shooted up, when image processing research was going on, there were many filters being designed. A very basic filter is vertical filter, which can give a which can detect vertical edges and similarly horizontal edges. But now these features may not be optimal. After this, Sobel filter came up, which was more robust, and that gives us the intuition that filters can be improved, and why not improve it in an optimal way based on the task which we have. So uh, the whole idea about using this convolutions is that uh, we can get better filters, and which will help us develop better features, and those better features can be used for solving complicated problems as we want. So we no more deal with in the traditional convolution was on a grayscale image, but we have RGB images. So how do we deal with that? So the convolution idea has been now extended to a 3D filter, where instead of having only two-dimensional metrics, we have three-dimensional filters, and we will find out wherever our filter is located at a point of time, we will multiply the corresponding elements and the filter elements and then sum them up, as simple as that, and generate a single mask. Although it is a 3D volume, both are 3D volumes, but the value which you will get is a two-dimensional mask, which is a kind of feature you generate if you have certain uh, numbers in your filter, which depends upon the task you want to uh, achieve. So that was something about convolution. And then neural networks. Neural networks is basically we are trying to mimic the neurons present in our brain. And as the neuron uh, study reveals, there are certain dendrites that takes the input from other neurons, and there is axon which outputs after certain processing done inside the cell. So with that understanding, a computational model is generated, which is popularly known as perceptron. And this perceptron is basically uh, very much mimicking the neuron, but there are certain novel aspects to it. What are those? We don't know what are the weights there, or even how the inputs are being combined, but uh, seeing what is happening there, certain processes have been developed. The number one process is weighted summation. We have several inputs to the neuron, and these weights are multiplied with, so these inputs are multiplied with certain weights, and output is achieved. And there is something interesting here, which is called bias. So why do we need bias? it is very easy to conceive that if we just take, if our uh, output is just based on the inputs, then we will get a line. If we talk about there is only one input and one output, the model will always be something like this, where it is passing through the origin. Then we are very much limiting our neural network to learn complicated models. So we want to make it flexible. How can we make it flexible? If we look at the general equation of a line, which is y is equal to mx plus c, so there is something called c, and that c is basically being represented using this bias, where we give input as constant 1 and there is a bias weight which we need to learn. So if there are n inputs, we actually learn n plus 1 weights, not n weights. And that is first function of a perceptron. Then there is a second function also, which is a nonlinear function. And when we apply whatever the output we have got by such weighted summation, that is given as an input to the this nonlinear function to achieve your output. So there are two functions that a neuron is doing, a perceptron is doing, which is a model for neuron. Now, what is the idea? Okay, we have developed this perceptron model. Uh, how are we going to benefit by such a model? So the idea is that if such a model exists, whatever may be the output, we may start with some random weights. Whatever may be the output, we can check with the ground truth labels, and there will be certain error, and that error can be used to update your weights. And you keep on doing this until your error becomes very less, and or your weights become very much constant, they do not change. So if that is happening, it means that uh, we have obtained a optimal weights, like the vertical and horizontal filter which we talked about. We have achieved an optimal filter like this, which is satisfying the observations of input and output we might be having in hand to develop such sets of weights. So only one neuron will not solve all the problems. We need multiple neurons, and there is a standard way to stack them up and try to solve a problem. And the standard way is that we have an input layer, and then we have a hidden layer and output layer. Basically, these are the it is the hidden layers which are learning the which are actually solving the problem in hand. It is learning very complicated functions, which is a mapping between input and output. So as these hidden layers increase, then our networks become deeper and deeper, and that's why it is called deep learning. So if we have now seen two types of two components of what this deep learning is, and today if they are popular, it is because of CNN idea. So uh, C here means convolution and NN means neural network. So we have seen the two concepts, convolution and neural network. So isn't there something common? The common thing is weighted summation. Now, if there is something common, can we leverage that to uh, solve the different problems in much better way? So the idea is the problem here is that different neurons may have different weights in a neural network layer, which are essentially one-dimensional layers. Just like you can see, there are all just one-dimensional layers. Now, how do we fit a 2D 2D data structure of image into this neural network is something very interesting to see. So how that is done is we can do two things. Number one, we can actually make 3D layers. So instead of this one-dimensional layers of neurons, we can have a 3D volume, and we can fix the weights of all neurons in a layer to be same. And as a result, lot of lot of benefit is there. What is the benefit? The benefit is we are going to now learn less number of weights. If we have two inputs and three outputs, we are going to have in a traditional neural network, we are going to have total 6 weights. Okay, but thanks to convolution, there is only I request everyone to mute themselves. Okay, so when we are convolving, there is there is only one filter, and basically uh, just maybe even 9 weights. Okay, if we have multiple layers, this may not reflect in this particular example, but if we have lots of neurons here, let's say 100 neurons input, and then 200 neurons in the next layer, then we are going to easily have 200 into 100 weights. But when we are talking about using convolution, then since we have assumed we are fixing the weights by layer to be same, then we just have one filter, and whatever the weight is, that is what we need to learn. So what is the advantage? We can preserve the nature of data while during the learning. So prior to uh, prior to this CNN idea, what was being done is that uh, if we just you want to use image for neural net image and try to solve, we won't learn any features, and we want to solve a particular problem. If that was the motivation, each pixel was being supplied to uh, each pixel was being supplied to the input layer in the form of a 1D layer, which is something against the nature of image data, which is a two-dimensional representation. So, using this kind of approach, we are basically preserving the data structure, and uh, we can more effectively learn about the data when we are preserving it. And as I just mentioned that such weight sharing, because throughout the layer we are going to have only a small set of weights, it reduces the number of learnable parameters very significantly. So if you look at a CNN, this is a very basic CNN being learned on MNIST data. Uh, so if we have an image, which is then why learn only one filter? We can learn the entire group of filters. So if we randomize each of these filters with different weights, and then learn then do the learning, which we will see how it happens, then we will have multiple filters which are being used even at one layer, and we can have uh, very complicated problem solved using multiple features at a particular level. So it is not just one filter that is used. There are multiple filters can be applied on the image. For example, here, when we are saying that this 2D image has been converted through convolution into 24 cross 24 cross n1 volume, it means that we have convolved using n1 filters, which could be very different, because you are randomly initializing them, and all you are receiving from the output is actually gradients. We will see what those gradients are, and gradients are uh, up, basically updating the whatever weights are available. So now when we have such a volume, though that volume can be again convolved, and then as we have seen that we are doing convolution with the 3D filters also. So now a 3D filter can be applied here, and we might have one more N1 channels, which means that we have N1 filters more, or or you or you just do on one channel and achieve this particular filter, where this particular map where you are using one particular filter for only this, and that way you uh, obtain new set of features, and new set of features, new set of features. There are two things to understand here, that the spatial dimensions are continuously reducing, and that is something which we would want, because essentially if you see a image, you can describe it. You may not describe it in great detail, but you can in essence tell that this is 2. Okay, so there is a possibility that the very big image can be represented in just few numbers. Okay, so uh, so we would want that the big image gets represented by very small numbers and set of features, which can be used for solving the problem. So our goal would be to reduce whatever we have, to systematically reduce the dimensions of the image, so that we can represent it in a smaller and smaller number of values. So if you see here, uh, let's say this is 28 cross 28, and we have, let's say n2 is maybe even 5, then this will be less than this. Okay, so this such a complicated image can be represented in a small fashion, and that can be used for solving even in this case digit recognition. And there is something also called pooling and no padding. So the way convolution is done, how this is getting reduced are, there are two ways they are getting reduced. One is no padding. We are not doing padding while doing the convolution. And then there is pooling, where we are taking a bunch of numbers here and represent them using statistics like maximum, average, etc. So if we take 4 numbers, take average of that and represent the summary of it to reduce the spatial dimensions of your current volume. That is something called pooling. So as you can see, that's what is happening. We are taking a 3 cross 3 grid, seeing what is maximum and replacing that value here. So instead of 5 cross 5, now we have 3 cross 3 representation of this. So these are something basics of deep learning. Now we will move to image classification. In image classification, there are two kinds of problems that are solved. One is multi-class classification and another is multi-label classification. What is multi-class classification? In multi-class classification, we assume that there is one object in the image and we want to represent that image by just that one label. In contrast, in multi-label classification, we understand that there could be multiple objects in the image. So we want to give multiple labels to the image. That's why it is called multi-label classification. And these both problems can be uh, solved in just one framework, which is that is the beauty of this deep learning. We will see how this can be done. Prior to this deep learning era, if uh, if we were trying to use multi-class classification, uh, then and building multi-label classification, it was easier. But multi-label classification was very difficult because you have to learn multiple classifiers, multiple multi-class classifiers to learn about something multi-label classification. The intuition basically could be you learn a classifier to say whether there is a dog or not, there is a rabbit or not, and then you pass on to the image. When then you pass on the image and check if there is a dog or not, and then there is a rabbit or not, and like this you have to learn multiple classifiers to do something called multi-label classification. So as I mentioned before, that the deep learning is not very new. Actually, the idea of this using CNN came up right in the 1998 using through a LANET paper. So just now what we discussed is was actually there in right in the 1998, and this was solved. So there is a image of 32 cross 32 and without padding, then it reduces through here 6 filters are being used, and then 6, then 16 filters are being used, and so on. So initially it was 1024 values we had to start with, and then we bring it down to 400 values, and now these 400 values can be flattened. Flattened means now this volume can be turned into a vector, and that vector can be passed on to your neural network, and you can then solve the problem. But this is not a step-by-step process. You actually don't know what are the weights here. So all of this is the entire network. It's not that first this is done and then this is done. No, then it will be like machine learning algorithm where we have this convolutional base which is doing the feature extraction, and then we have neural network which is doing the classification. It's not like that. It is the entire package, and all the weights are learnt right from the scratch. So as I mentioned, there were certain limitations of such an approach, like data labeling we didn't have, or computational powers we did not have. But in 2012, I was referring to this paper on AlexNet, which actually brought, we can say, the deep learning fame was brought into this world because of this paper. So uh, they took up a challenge of image classification. There was a challenge and they participated, and they showed that if we use this deep learning approach, then we are doing better than many traditional machine learning algorithms like SVM, which was state of the art prior to this. So so when this was proposed, it was mostly centered around how to apply this uh, image for solving this kind of neural network problem. It was still a something like neural network only, because there is not so much depth. We hardly have 4 layers or even few more, 6 layers. That's it. So what AlexNet did, it proposed a intuition that instead of having very few layers, we can actually increase the depth of the neural network and solve the problems, the such problems in much effective way, in more effective way. So they bring down at using multiple convolutional layers, and here you can see almost 8 convolutional layers are there compared to 4 in the LayNet, and that's how they do, and they use very sophisticated type of network. Sometimes they do uh, pooling as it was done, and then in they bring out this same convolution. So same convolution means in LayNet there was no padding. So as a result, uh, always intuition was that always the effect was that this volume was decreasing spatially. But they showed that if we do padding, then we can also preserve the same structure and also expand it if it is uh, required. And and so like this, when we have uh, and they were expanding using multiple very big size of filters. Now, size means number of filters up to 256. So so in this way they are able to they brought deep learning fame, and they showed that if we use deeper network, then we are able to solve the problem. Now, when you look at LXNet, then it appears that we have to try out many things, and then we might be able to solve the problem. You hardly see any consistency here. You first of all have a small number of channels, then you make it very big number of channels, and then you reduce back to 256. So it appears that there is hardly any consistency, or we have to try out many things to solve a problem. And VGG, it tried to standardize the things, and they showed that even if your network is simple and your network is deep enough, more deeper, it was more deeper than even AlexNet, so we can solve the problem. So they showed that if we do this same kind of convolution twice, and so you can think of 2 plus 2 and plus 3 can, and one more. So 11 layers they had compared to 8 of AlexNet, and they were but the beauty is that there is a consistency. One convolutional filter of 3 cross 3 size, and the max pooling is also done of only 2 cross 2. So using this simple setup and trying to solve the problem in this way, just a simple approach of designing the network, they could do better than AlexNet. So now, after these two networks, one may think that if I make our network deeper, then maybe performance will increase. But in theory, yes, that uh, that performance should increase. The training error should reduce. But in reality, it doesn't happen. There will be it will be beneficial as you increase the number of layers. It will be beneficial up to a certain point. The training error will reduce, but when you increase further, the uh, the training error actually increases. And the reason that was found was that there are certain things called vanishing and exploding gradients. So what are these vanishing gradients and exploding gradients? As I mentioned, what exactly we are receiving from the uh, output layer to other layers are gradients. And these gradients at certain point, they become very negligible. As a result, you don't learn for for previous for the initial layers, and you will see due to chain rule, in the chain rule, what comes out is that we can represent the gradients required for this layer in terms of all these gradients, and then it becomes more problematic if one of them become 0, then this the gradient for this will also become 0, and then we cannot, and we can this cannot learn at all. So that is something called vanishing gradient. And then if there is exploding gradient is opposite. If exploding gradient means it is very high number, and hardly these things stabilize. The initial layers stabilize because of that. If they don't stabilize, then you cannot learn better features later on, because if we are building something, we need foundations to be strong. They are stable, and that will not happen because because of these exploding gradients. So if they are not learning properly, they are not stable, then these things will also not be stable. So as a result, this exploding gradients also become problem, and the training error shoots up. So ResNet was introduced. The idea of ResNet was that uh, I'm just going to give the intuition here. So we will try to give the feedback of the current layers, sorry, the initial layers to later layers. So what is this feedback in the form of? The feedback is in the form of activations being passed to the later layers, and skipping some of the layers. So these layers have information what exactly is happening with the initial layers. So as a result, they can correct themselves if they are seeing that uh, the results are not improving, of the initial gradients are not able to learn, then they will then the later layers will try to correct, because they are getting the feedback from the initial layers. It is uh, it is just an intuition I'm trying to give, taking the feedback from initial layers uh, to correct the later layers gradients. So that was so thanks to this ResNet's idea, we are able to today learn even deep learning neural networks with even 100 plus layers. So this ResNet was the paper which actually solved this problem of uh, trying to do this with uh, even deeper and deeper networks. So there is then Inception network, which is also popular as GoogleNet. So the idea here is that uh, they introduced something called 1x1 convolution. So what this 1x1 convolution does is if we do 1x1 convolution of 5, okay, there is only 1x1 convolution means uh, there is only in spatially there is only one cross one matrix, and that's it. And it appears when we are just having a 2D matrix, and we are doing convolution of one, we are what we are seeing is only we are multiplying If you apply convolution of this, all you will do is multiply with 5 for each of this element. You will get 10, 15, and so on. But when you are talking, then what is the point of this? The idea is when you have a volume, then you can do very interesting things with this 1 cross 1 convolution. What can we do? We can actually uh, change the hello. Am I audible? Hello. Is there any problem with my voice?
Sir, you are audible.
Okay.
So the idea is that if we have this 1 cross 1 convolution into, means there are more channels here. So let's say it is 5. Let's say we have 5 channels. Okay, 5 classifiers. Okay. So it is going to have same number of as we do in convolution, it is going to have same number of channels as this. Let's say 10, and there here also 10 channels are there. So you will get one number only when you are applying convolution here. Okay, 2. But then, although you are getting only a single number, single map accordingly, if you have multiple filters like this, let's say 5. Okay, 5 filters of 1 cross 1 convolution. So what is the advantage? We are going to reduce the size in channel wise. In the channel direction, we can reduce the size without many like 3 cross 3 filters. Traditionally, the filters which were being used was 3 cross 3 and 5 cross 5. And you could reduce the dimension channel wise using these only. Okay. And these are expensive to learn as well. But when you are talking about 1 cross 1 convolution, then you are learning, you are having less weights, first of all, and to learn, and you are able to reduce the number of dimensions channel wise. So 1 cross 1 convolution is very popular in reducing the dimensions channel wise. So let's say I apply 1 cross 1 convol here. There is a 28 cross 28 cross 192 activation is present in your neural network, and you want to reduce this to 96 without having many weights to learn. So uh, so you can have 1 cross 1 convolution using 96 filters, and you can reduce. So your 28 cross 28 cross 96 volume you will get. Okay. So this paper actually introduces 1 cross 1 convolution, and the main idea which they introduced was that why do we need a only 3 cross 3 filter in a 3 cross 3 filter or 5 cross 5 filter at a time. If you see all previous networks, they were all using a uh, particular type of filter, either 3 cross 3 or 5 cross 5 or 3 cross 3. So their intuition was that we don't know which filter might be useful in uh, in a particular state at a particular step. Can we utilize all of them together? So this 1 cross 1 convolution helps in doing that. So how can this be done? So let's talk about direct 1 cross 1 convolution. It will give us this let's say we are having 64 filters. So we have achieved this using 1x1 convolution. Then then if we want 3x3 convolution, we will divide this. We let's say these 192 activations are there. Okay, now 192 channels are there, and we want to apply, we want to build our next volume using multiple filters. So using 64 1x1 filters, this portion was developed. And then you first apply your 1x1 convolution, and we will have this 28 cross 28 cross 96. Then you can apply 3x3 convolution to achieve again 128 layers volume, which you can concatenate with this, and so on. 5x5 also you can concatenate with this. And then okay, then if why use only this 1x1 or 1x, we can even use max pooling. So how max pooling can be done? We will have same convolution where spatially it doesn't change, and 3x3 we do. So in the neighborhood, whichever is maximum, that's what we get. So so we will get only as many as 192. So we will be getting same as this, but maximum in the neighborhood, and that can be applied. Then we can do 1x1 convolution, and then adjust the channels, and then concatenate this way. So the idea here is that we can concatenate using this 1x1 with the help of this 1x1 filters. We can concatenate these volumes, because we can reduce the size of channels as per our need, and concatenate them. So that's the idea of inception, because it will 1x1 will help us reduce the dimensions required, which 3x3 filters, if we 3x3 or 5x filters, 5x5 filters, if we use just for reducing the dimensions in channel direction, then we have to compute lots of weights, which is not desirable. And we can just use this 1x1 convolution to reduce in the channel dimension. So like this, there are several pre-trained networks, and these pre-trained networks can be uh, used in multiple ways. Number one, we can use them as feature extractors for solving a very similar problem. Let's say you have learned on 1,000 categories of objects. Okay, but uh, but you want to solve a problem which has not been solved by yet in terms of classification. For example, you all know railways, and there are certain defects somewhere. Okay, and you want to you are taking the picture of this by putting the camera on the engine, and you want to know whether the path ahead is good enough to travel on or no. Okay, so that is not something solved using the current neural networks. So if you can use those neural networks as feature extractor, how can we use that feature extractor? Actually, if you see the neural networks, once they are learned, they can be divided into two parts, which is convolutional base, where all the convolutions are happening, and then fully connected part, which is same as MLP prior to the deep learning era. So whatever features you have learned, they can be utilized uh, for solving these problems. And it is understood that if we what happens is that initially very basic features are learned, and then as you move on, more middle middle level features are learned, which are common for even other problems. Let's say these learn edges. Okay, so if these edges are not only related to the problem which you try to solve using your initial neural network, they can be employed elsewhere also. So why not just take your features that you have learned and apply it somewhere, which we have been doing. Let's say talk about shift. The shift is not just used for for only a particular set of problems. It is being used for all kinds of problems. So why not the feature learned using deep learning on solving some other problem? That is something this pre-trained networks offer. And another thing which they can do is we can change the neural network itself. For so if we have the neural network, we can change last few layers. Just learn these. Keep all this constant. We will not learn this and just learn these particular last few layers. So we basically train this. Why are we doing this? Because the problem specific features are only present at the end. They are not generic. They are the problem which was trying to be solved in the beginning. Those features are present in the later layers and which are not useful for solving a new problem. So we will just learn these and these are assumed to be generic features. And if we just change this neural architecture at the later part of the algorithm and of your neural network and just learn these uh, weights for last layers, then we can solve even the new problem. And the last one more usage is nowadays many of the these pre-trained networks are being used as backbone of your network. So backbone means they will uh, give you rich features to solve more complicated problem for further learning. For example, semantic segmentation, which we will shortly see. It uses these neural networks, these pre-trained neural networks as backbones to solve the more complicated problems like semantic segmentation. So, uh, so how does this help neural network in multi-class classification? There are certain changes you need to consider. These are not changes. These are basically if you are solving a multi-class classification problem, then you should use this. And if you are solving a multi-label classification problem, you should use this. So what are these? This is where you are solving multi-class classification. If you remember in multi-class classification, we are saying only one label is there. OK, so at the end, there is a softmax layer that is used. And why is this softmax layer required? If you go by the neural network, what is the output? It will be some probability. Let's say somewhere it is 0.8, somewhere it is 0.7, somewhere it is 0.6, somewhere it is 0.5, and so on. And then why this? We can take maximum here also. We can take it, but uh, but the problem here is that the way we design our setup is using one hot vector of target, where we give 0 where where if the class is not present in that image, let's say 0, 1, 0, 0. OK, this is the second class for that image. Now, if you see what is happening is, although it is right, 0.81. But here, if you see, it is 0.7 that you are trying to compare with 0. So it unnecessarily increases the error. Okay, instead of this, because of these errors, then you may have to train for much longer time. Okay, so why not do in such a way that this wherever we are having that we will have the, although it will give 0 to 1, but it will not give us the what sum will not be 0. Their sum will not be 0. But what softmax layer does is it will uh, try to give the sum of these outputs as 1. Okay, and which is something in line with your sum of one hot vector in the target. Here also sum is 1 and here also sum is 1. So the total error will not be much. But if you go by this and just take maximum of this, then error could be very high unnecessarily, and that will lead to more and more computational resources. So why not ensure that we we make the sum of the uh, output, sum of all these probabilities also 1, and that is being ensured using softmax layer in addition to providing the 0 to 1 output. So that was multi-class classification. And when we are using multi-label classification, then this thing doesn't satisfy because it is not always 1, right? It is, it could be 2 also. In multi-class classification, your ground truth vector could be 0, 1, 1, 0 also. So so you cannot apply this softmax layer. You have to go by the traditional way of using your sigmum function at the as activation function. There is no softmax layer in your multi-label classification problem. Then there are other loss functions also, that also changes, which this loss is basically for every neuron that is being computed, and then it is being, this is basically the log loss, and it is being computed for every neuron and then averaged. Here we are, because we are doing multi-class classification, here also, here just we need to sum them up. Whatever output, this is the output layer, and whatever the probability you have got, you just need to sum them up. You don't have to take the average as such. So that is one difference here. And in multi-label classification, it is basically becomes at every neuron a at every neuron, it becomes a binary classification problem. And if you are aware of logistic regression, you must be also quite conversant with this particular log loss. And in multi-class classification, there is a categorical cross entropy loss that is being developed, where for every neuron you are multiplying your log of probabilities with the y values and summing them up to find your loss function. And there is obvious difference of target vector. Now let's see how exactly these neural networks are working. So if you see that we randomly initialize our weights of the neural networks, and there are targets, then given the functions which we have seen, we can propagate from input to the output and obtain certain values here. And like this, so we have got through forward propagation for net h1, which means here up to here we have got, and then output of O1 and O2 we have got here. So we have got till here. Now we are going to compare with this. When we compare with this, we can compute some error. For example, this particular error, which is MSC loss, and this MSC loss, once we can actually use something called chain rule. So what does chain rule say? If there is a function, if E total is a function of a dependent variable, and that dependent variable is function of this dependent variable, then we can uh, create this kind of chain rule. So we know that W5 is the function of, sorry, uh, net O1 is a function of W5, and output O1 is function of net of O1. How this net O1 is a function of W5? Because it is going to, it is basically the weighted sum of the inputs. So there is a relationship between net O1 and W5. Similarly, there is a relationship between out O1 and net O1 through activation function, which is a nonlinear function. And there is a direct relationship between E total and output O1, which we have just seen. So if that is the case, then we can expand this into this. So we can compute this, and then we can compute this, and then we can compute this, and that's what is happening here. So once that is done, we have then comes gradient descent. So why are we computing these gradients E total upon W5? So that we can update it, update the weights. And like this, W5 got updated. Now the question comes, there is not only one weight, there are millions of weights. Is there any strategy to update them in a very optimal and a very systematic way? So which is called backpropagation. So these are some notations where we have number of neurons in a layer, weights, biases in a layer, similarly activations of that layer, and Z of this layer, which is basically weighted sum, and then G, which is the activation function. So as you are aware that Z is basically weighted sum along with the bias, and activation is the activations of the final activation is the whatever output you have got here. On that a nonlinear function is applied and we get these activations. And we have another thing, what this is something which we know, and then we also know that if we have the cost ready and we have this gradient descent equations, and we know this is the cost we have got, and we know how we are going to update them. Now what do we need? We need this dou C upon dou WL. So this is not just one number, this is actually a matrix. The W is actually a matrix, and we are trying to compute all this together. There is a nice concept of vectorization where if we are solving a similar, if we are doing a similar computation, it is all of them are done parallelly, and that saves lot of computations. So so there is lots of matrix and algebra involved in doing that. So so here when we are dealing here, we are actually dealing with matrices and vectors, not just one value. So this can be updated like this, but we what do we need here? We need this dou C upon dou W and dou C upon dou B, and these are the weights which matter, which is basically the data present in the network which we need to compute. So how are these being computed? If we see this is simple. When we have this kind of setup, then we are in forward propagation. This is what is happening. We have activations, and then we have weights and biases, which leads to ZA, and then to this activation is passed to next layer for using A1s of previous layer and computing the weighted sum up to we achieve our output, which gives us a loss. This was forward pass, and if we that is very simple. But if we look at how are we going to compute it, if we look at any layer, we can actually, and this is what we needed. This can be further expanded like this because Z is a function of W. And once we can do this, this is something very easy to compute because there is a direct relationship between Z and W. But this Z could be this weighted sum of any layer. And we don't have a direct relationship with the cost. All we have is the maybe to the Z of the last layer. We don't have the for any layer. So so what can we do? We will further uh, apply chain rule on this. So when we apply chain rule on this, we find out that we can actually write these in terms of next layer. So if we are talking about layer L, we can expand this in this form, and this is something known using because this is basically Z is a weighted sum of A's, and A is the non-linear function of Z. So this can be derived. OK, but this we don't know. But the beauty of this equation is it is saying that Dou C Z is based on Dou C ZL. So ZL plus 1. So if you know Dou C Z, Dou C upon Dou ZL plus 1, then you know this also. So what intelligent thing we can do? If we know last layer, then we can know second last layers, just DC Dou C upon Dou ZL. And then if we know second last layer, then we can know third last layer. So and so on. So if we know Dou C upon Dou Z3, then we can know Dou C upon Dou Z2. And then we can know if we because we know Dou C upon Dou Z2, we can know Dou C upon Dou Z1. And if we know this, we can get these also just from these equations. So that is the way the weights are sorry the gradients are being computed. And if we know the gradients, what we can do? We will apply gradient descent to update our weights. So this is how these weights are getting updated. But this only works in fully connected layers. When we are talking about convolutional layers, there also weights need to be obtained. Weights need to be updated. So how exactly those gradients are being propagated from our fully connected layers to our convolutional base is the following. So let's say we have this Vy. Vy is basically output of a current layer. So if there is a output of some layer here, this is what this output is input to the this layer. So if you see this, if you see between any two layers, the gradients are propagating through also A's. So this Dou C upon Dou A is something which is being referred here. So this is actually Dou C upon Dou A coming from the previous layer. It is being represented differently for space constraints. And in convolutional layers, it turns out that if we have these activation, if we have these gradients, okay, for because uh, this 2D matrix has been this 2D matrix or 3D matrix has been converted into vector and passed on to fully connected layer. So whatever activations they have, they can be actually distributed in form of a 2D a matrix like this. Okay, and these metrics when we this matrix when multiplied with the input of that particular layer, not multiplied, convolved with the this, then we can actually get dw, which is dou c upon dou w. And because we need dx, why do we need dx? We need dx to give to previous layer of that since there are multiple convolutional layers. So here dy you got, okay, and here you have dx, which becomes dy of this. So for obtaining dy of this, you need dx. So dx for this layer. So this dx can be computed by since this has received dy here, we can again do convolution like this with the padding, and whatever the current weights are there for that layer, if we convolve with that, then we get our dx. So which can be propagated to the next layer. So here dx is what being propagated, which is dou c upon dou a in convolutional, and this becomes very essential in the convolutional layers, and in fully connected layers dou c upon dou z become very important. Coming to our last section, I will try to wrap up very quickly since time is very short. So in semantic segmentation, our the problem is that we want to label each pixel now. So far, we were talking about giving a label to entire image. Let's say lady here. Okay, but now we want to give label to each pixel, what it is. So if there are predefined labels like person, pursue, uh, plant, and so on, and you give a particular number to that, and then we want to predict that particular uh, numbers. But exactly we don't predict these numbers because they are meaningless. There is no meaning between in saying that this three plant is 3 times person. You cannot say that. So as a result, we cannot use these, even we should not predict these numbers. Instead, what we should predict is the probability values of that happening. So as a result, if we have 5 labels, then we generate this 0 1 encoded map. If the object is present, you give 1. If it doesn't, then 0. So your output will be actually a volume. And this is what you are trying to predict. This is the ground truth. And at the end, also you want that such a thing should happen with certain probabilities. You are giving probabilities at at in the output of what is the probability of this pixel belonging to this particular class. So it has several applications, like you can see, autonomous vehicles and medical segmentation, medical diagnosis, and so on. It has lots of applications when we are when we are classifying pixels this way. Now we can say that we can do this. What is so great about it? We can do even through simple convolution. Okay. Whatever convolutional filters we have got, and we will have convolutional volumes here, and we will try to map this with our 0 1 volume and try to predict this weights. Okay, all these convolutional weights we will try to predict. That could be very straightforward way. But the problem with this is that this is going to be computationally very expensive. First of all, we are trying to solve a very complicated problem. It is not as easy as classification, which was just giving one value for the entire image. Here, for every pixel, you have to give a value. So your neural network has to be very, very deep. And because of that, you will have lots of filters to deal with, and parameters increase then. And we may not be also sure that we are actually learning, because we should be able to represent the entire image into small number of values, which is not happening here. We are just having same, and this is not at all reducing, which is very detrimental to the entire learning. We are not able to generate the feature extraction is not happening. The idea of feature extraction is you are trying to summarize the complex idea into a very small representation, which is not happening in this way. So is there any better way to do this? So it turns out there is, but once we reduce the spatial dimension, we need certain algorithms to expand them as well. So how can that be done? The spatial resolution has to increase also. So how that is, that could have been, that was initially proposed is that we can take nearest neighbor approach. If we have 1 1, then we will make it 4 ones, and that way convert this 2 cross 2 matrix to 4 cross 4 matrix. And then then others propose that we can have bed of nails method, where we won't give, and this apparently this worked better, where we have we give only one value instead of giving same value for all. We will give only one value instead of for all. And there is something called max pooling as well. So what is max pooling? Here we save where exactly, because most of the spatial dimension reduction is happening due to pooling. If we save where exactly the weights are, where exactly the uh, numbers have been borrowed from, okay, those positions, if they are saved, there exactly we can place them back. So 2 has been placed here, 1 has been placed at that particular location. Similarly, uh, 3 has been placed here because maximum was present here. And so if you preserve previous location where exactly your maximums were, then you can also obtain, you can update your outputs in that manner if you know where exactly the maximum was. So that's the way of expansion. But since we are not actually learning, we are just expanding it. We are not learning anything. We are not learning how to do this. So a deconvolution idea was proposed. So what is this deconvolution? It is actually, as the name suggests, it is opposite of convolution, where we multiply one value of input to entire filter. So if you see, there is a filter which is moving, and this is your input layer. Okay. And whatever is the number at this pixel locations, that will be multiplied by these this filter throughout, and whatever values you have got, they will be placed there. Now problem with this is a pixel will can have multiple values depending upon where your location is. So we will add them up. Whatever values this pixel has received through such deconvolution, we will add them up. So here you can see it just is very simple representation. Here we have input and we have this filter. So first with A we will multiply AX, AY, AZ we have got. And but this particular location needs to have, if we are depending upon how you are, what is your stride. So if your stride is such of only 2, then there has you this will receive multiple values AZ and BX. So we will just add them up and continue your expansion from AB to such a big representation. So it turned out that when we are doing this, although we are roughly getting where exactly the object is, but it is not finely, it is not very fine output. So to improve this fine out, what was observed is we are actually through pooling, we are losing the information. So can we retrieve it back? So for retrieval, how exactly they are doing is, let's say they have been pooled and such big numbers are now being represented as just one number. So through deconvolution, you can get this something like that. From one number, you can get 4 numbers. And before arriving this, there was one more layer, which was giving 4 numbers. Then we can add them. Okay, this is the further proceedings of your network. We can add them. And once we add, again we do deconvolution, then it becomes 4 cross 4 matrix. And there was something similar before also in pool 3. So why not add them up? So we are basically taking previous layers activations and summing them up after every deconvolution. And we keep on doing this until we achieve very fine grid like the original image. So this worked well. And what we are learning these weights. OK. So so this works quite better. And as you can see, and there is something called dilated convolutions also. So in dilated convolutions, your filter is distributed. They are not concentrated. So you can see that you are updating your values in a dilated fashion instead of concentrated fashion of 3 cross 3. OK. So each pixel will have certain cost, and we are going to compute the pixel. We are going to add all these cost pixel wise. And then once we add pixel wise losses, then we will compute average in a spatial average in spatial dimensions. So this is the way the loss is computed. OK, I am